Welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast, where you learn how to extract your business and personal deep wealth. I'm your host, Jeffrey Feldberg. This podcast is brought to you by Deep Wealth and the 90-Day Deep Wealth Experience. When it comes to your business deep wealth, your exit or liquidity event is the most important financial decision of your life. But unfortunately, up to 90% of liquidity events fail. Think about all that time and your hard-earned money wasted. Of the quote-unquote successful liquidity events, most business owners leave 50% to over 100% of the deal value in the buyer's pocket and don't even know it. I should know. I said no to a seven-figure offer and yes to mastering the art and the science of a liquidity event. 2 years later, I said yes to a different buyer with a 9-figure deal. Are you thinking about an exit or liquidity event? Don't become a statistic and make the fatal mistake of believing the skills that built your business are the same ones to sell it. After all, how can you master something you've never done before? Let the 90-Day Deep Wealth Experience and the 9-step roadmap of preparation help you capture the best deal instead of any deal. At the end of this episode, take a moment and hear from business owners like you who went through the Deep Wealth Experience. Ahmie Baum is a founder and CEO of Interchange Capital Partners, a family business that has honed a comprehensive and collaborative process over its 40 years of practice in financial services and is dedicated to helping clients and their families build financial safety nets. With over 40 years of practice in financial services, with a clientele of business owners trying to transition to retirement, Ahmie has been named to the Barron's Top 1000 Financial Advisor list. Mr. Baum and his team previously managed over $420 million in client assets. Welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast. And for all you business owners out there, whether you're starting a business, you're already in a business, perhaps it's even a family business, how do you deal with all of those issues that come up? I'm talking growing a business. I'm talking succession, family dynamics. You heard it in the official introduction. I'm going to pause it right there because you're in for a real treat. We don't have theory. We leave that for the classroom and all the teachers. We have someone from the trenches. You're going to hear things that you're likely not going to hear anywhere else. I'm really excited about this episode. So, Ahmie, welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. And I'm curious because there's always a story behind the story. So, Ahmie, what's your story? What got you to where you are today?
Well, first, welcome and excited to be here and hope that your listeners can find some value in this. So, my story is a pretty typical story of coming from nothing. My father and 3 brothers ran a business. They were in the restaurant, food, catering business. And, they were from New York City. And for whatever reasons, they all decided to move to Houston, Texas, and they went bankrupt. Then the 3 of them went in separate directions. And my father made a decision to move into education and academics and not business. And frankly, had a disdain for business, understandably so. But, he would constantly, his mantra was, what do you think? Money grows on trees. And I lived in a middle-class neighborhood, not too, there was parts that were upper middle class. And I'd look around and I'd say, well, Dad, they look like they have money trees over there. And so, and again, that was just me internally talking, not necessarily having the conversation with him. And, like most individuals at my age, after you get through high school, you go to college. So I got accepted to college, get so excited. My father comes home from work. I said, Dad, I got accepted. He said, great. How are you going to pay for it? I said, what? How am I going to pay for it? I thought you could. And that was the beginning of my understanding that my father really was living on a tightrope without a safety net. And it further explained as life went on and time went on that was a major issue between him and my mother. And so part of what I recognized was that life seemed to go better when there was a money tree. And so I made it part of my purposes to go out there and build a money tree. And so I put myself through college and was fortunate to run a restaurant with a gentleman whose father was a stockbroker for E.F. Hutton.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 1979, I took the 6-year plan graduating college, but that's another story, for that. And ultimately went to work for E.F. Hutton, smiling and dialing. At that time, Chrysler was going bankrupt and we were selling bonds. E.F. Hutton was selling bonds for that. And we just worked through that. And I didn't think it could work. And it turned out that at least worked for me. And then I realized that the system of stockbrokering was adversarial. It didn't really work. And, there were a couple of things that E.F. Hutton pioneered. One was professional money management for individuals, and the other was financial planning. So I was getting ready to leave, and, my branch manager said, "You can't, you're doing so well." I said, "Yes, but my clients, I need something." So I learned about professional money management, became a professional money manager. I learned about planning, and I fast forward to the crash of 87, and I'm sitting there working out with a friend who's a very wealthy family, and turns to me and he says, "I just can't make your stuff work." And I'm sitting there, what do you mean you can't make my stuff work? And I don't know what possessed me to ask this question. I just said, do you treat your wealth and everything that you say you can't, do you treat it like you do your business? And it's like I hit him between the eyes, and all of a sudden blood's drained. He says, "No, I don't." And so light bulbs went off for him and light bulbs went off for me. I said, if this very wealthy family can't make it work and they're not treating it like a business, there seems to be a major problem here that maybe I can solve. And that became the journey to become the go-to advisor for family business. Now, I got to take you through all the ups and downs and all the stuff of that, but that was in 87, and we kept working it and moving it forward till fast forward to my 65th birthday, when we had already proven the concept inside of UBS. And the plan, I altered my retirement plan to say, okay, let's really do something, because I had created all of this and I sent it to UBS for them as a white paper. And it took a couple of 3 months. I kept asking, where is it? And by the time it came back, compliance had redlined everything and said, that's not the role of a financial advisor. And I said, you know what? Okay, I get it. That's a role that we play and we need to play for these family businesses and these business owners. So we decided to go independent on my 65th birthday. And as my son said, we were, a startup with a 42-year track record. Fast forward to today, which we're in June, we'll be celebrating our 3rd year as Interchange Capital. And we're now the Swiss Army knife, if you will, for family businesses and closely held businesses to be able to work through the inherent natural complexities that exist around the interchanges of family, business, individual ownership, et cetera.
Wow. So, really humble beginnings that put you on your path. And then you had this trajectory very serendipitously, this one question for a wealthy friend that put you on the path where you ended up today. So you've lived it, you've breathed it, you've gone through it. And as I alluded to earlier, you're really coming from the trenches. And so for our listeners, and offline, what I loved about what we were talking about offline, and for our listeners, let's bring them up to speed. Whether it's not a family business right now, you're the first generation and you're just getting into it, you're building it, you're growing it, or it is a family business, perhaps your second generation, maybe third generation, whatever it may be. In either case, at one point, it always becomes back to a family business. So, what would you say for our listeners who are either new at it or they're now in the thick of things? Sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. So you're speaking to a lot of businesses out there. You're seeing the good, the bad, the ugly, everything else in between. What would be some typical blind spots that Interchange Capital, with your expertise, you're coming in to really straighten out for the business owners and make that difference? Any one or two things that jump out for you?
Well, yeah. I think the first thing is that there's a lot to unpack. And therefore, we talk about 2 sets of interchanges. So The first interchange that we talk about is between the individual, the family, the business, and the ownership. And so a recognition and understanding that as a business owner, it is bigger than just what you do day to day in terms of, so every business owner we run into, most of the time default to what they can control. And so what they can control is running the business and growing the business and doing all that stuff. They're control freaks. They're rightfully so, because that's what, when you look at that, the interchange of the individual, the family, the business, and the owner, which one are you naturally going to gravitate? You're going to naturally gravitate to control. So the first thing that's important is there's a natural, normal complexity, frustration, and obstacles that take place that you think are business related. But ultimately, when we get there, we realize, well, wait a minute, it really has to do with how you're showing up, the individual. It's, oh, wait a second, this is really a family dynamic that is causing some of this issue. Oh, this really isn't the business. This is the ownership. And, how are we going to, because each one of those have a different goal. So the individual is all about get me success generally. The family's goal is usually about nurturing. The business's goal is all about profitability. And the ownership is all about financial security. So those four pieces have very different goals. So it's not surprising that when you cross from one interchange to the other and you don't know that you've crossed that way, that you're walking into the proverbial, lion's mouth or a snake den. That's an important recognition, because when we see people who get that, they say, oh, all of a sudden now I see it differently. I've been able to recognize I'm trying to solve a family issue in my business. That's never going to work. I'm trying to solve a business issue in my family. I'm trying to solve an ownership issue, and our individual choices and ideas and goals are different. So I would say the recognition that this is an issue is the first step in the clarity around why it's so complicated and why you tend to focus. I'll just stay in that area of control. And we know that the worst way to get maximum value is if you stay in control. We just know, anybody who does exit planning, and Jeffrey, you've done it, and everyone knows that the first thing you want to do is remove yourself as the linchpin here. That increases value dramatically.
So, what you're sharing, and for our listeners, I really hope you're paying attention, because, it's pivotal. And I'll put my own words on it. You can tell me if I'm on base or off base. What I'm hearing you say is, as business owners, and let's face it, come on, we're type A and we're hard charging, we love control, and what we don't know sometimes can scare us. Okay, I'm not going to deal with that. I'll shove that off to the side and I'll focus what I can do. And so when you put the family dynamic in there and all the issues that go into on the individual side, the business side, the ownership side, that as business owners in a family-run kind of business or environment, I am in some ways ignoring or putting under the carpet, so to speak, sweeping under the carpet the bigger issues and focusing on a narrower set. If I'm hearing you right, obviously the problems aren't going away. They're just festering, and they're going to get bigger and bigger until they just overtake everything. So I don't know what to do. So let me do what I do. And in the process, I'm creating a mess.
And there are advisors that you have around you, you built, because you can't be successful at business if you don't have legal advice, tax advice, banking advice. And part of the issue is, so when you do get to a place where it gets, the ceiling of maximum,
Sure.
I got to get this going, you then go to one of those advisors that you think can solve the problem. And now you're running down a road that is absolutely fraught with inefficiencies and ineffectivenesses around that. So that leads to what we built at Interchange, which is the next set of interchange.
So let's talk about that, Ahmie, because you've identified what's essentially a core problem. And forget a liquidity event, because if we can't work through these issues, there's not going to be a business at one point in time. Correct. Everything's great until it's not. Correct. So now Interchange comes into the scene, and with your expertise and your systems, can you walk us through your process? How do you make that crooked path straight and get things going as they should?
Sure. I mean, we built this to be able to support the family business, closely held business owner in wherever they are in the life cycle of that.
Okay.
So the first thing is always the goose that lays the golden egg. It's the business.
Sure.
So one of the things that Interchange Capital brings to the table is the opportunity to help a business owner create what we call a self-managing company.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what's interestingly is once you create a self-managing company, it changes the dynamics around exit and succession planning.
Sure.
Okay. Dramatically.
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing is so if what you're looking at is you don't have the right people, you don't have the right strategy, you don't have the right execution, and most importantly, you don't recognize that cash is king because you really don't understand how to operate and understand your balance sheet and your financial statements, because most business owners don't. So we have to make sure that we got the right people on the bus, that we've got the secret sauce, that we're executing properly, and that we're generating cash, not just revenue, not just profitability, but true cash. That's on the business side. Then from there, you might say, okay, I'm pretty good with that. I think we're okay there. All right. So, but I have one child in the business. I've got 3 children out of the business, or I've got 19 family members in the business in Gen 3, and we've got 45 in Gen 4, and we need to work on how we're going to get this next gen engaged. That moves into the second offering, which what we call the generational conversations. Okay. So there's a whole body of work to be able to help have these generational conversations within the family. And sometimes it's, even if you're not a family business, but you are a business and your family members are all outside, there's still a necessity to have the generational conversation, because the worst thing you can is not prepare. So what tends to happen is business owners, they prepare their assets for their children. They don't prepare their children for the assets. And that's a critical part of that generational conversation.
A quick side note, because I've always wondered, and I see this with family businesses, first generation is terrific, obviously. Second generation, it's also fairly good, maybe even better. Maybe they take it to the next level. But you brought up an interesting scenario, and I'm just going to pick some numbers out of the air. I mean, how do you deal with it when it's a family business? You're now going to the third generation and beyond, because it's growing exponentially, the family members, but the business isn't necessarily, and probably isn't growing exponentially. So 45 members in your example, heading into the business, that could be a problem.
There's all kinds of problems. Obviously, one of the major problems, to your point, is how is the goose laying enough golden eggs to be able to support the next gen? That's number one. Number two is that next gen, are they really engaged and involved? There's a myth out there that, and it's called shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve in 3 generations.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's actually a myth. It's not reality. And, the studies that really have done the research around and followed family businesses, the reason why they say that is because the original business that Generation 1 started is not necessarily the business that the family is generating in Gen 3 or Gen 4. So the issue around finding engagement, there are some people that want to build family businesses and family legacy. It's important to be able to work with these generations. Yeah, after you've got the golden goose, you need to constantly be able to create more and more value and create more and more opportunity. But now you need to be able to work with these next generations and get their engagement and their buy-in. And the beauty, and this is what I frankly love about family businesses, is there's something very tangible about a family that can come together to make decisions and create a much better life beyond just employees and community and their family. And there's something very special about that. Mm-hmm. And in order to engage that and their ability to transform the economies of communities, their ability to transform all kinds of things, because there's an inherent love and affection and nurturing that goes on in families, especially the ones that are most successful with this. That it's really remarkable. So that generational conversation, how do you do that? You need to be able to truly recognize that the problem with generational conversations is the same problem I had, and I hear it again. Everybody said the baby boomers were too busy smoking pot and doing drugs. There was no way they were ever going to be able to run the country. Okay, so now we have the baby boomers are saying, these millennials, they're not willing to work hard. They're not willing to do that. Again, there's this constant bashing of generation to generation, which is total nonsense, in our opinion. The fact of the matter is what we need to be able to do is create a different roadmap and a different set of conversations where we truly can begin to understand that every human being has special sauce. Every human being has the opportunity. It wasn't put here by accident. Again, not to get too personal, but we're mourning the miscarriage of my daughter at this time.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And so we know it's a very special thing to even get here. It's not like everybody gets a shot here based upon the biology of it. So if you're here, there's a reason why you're here, we believe. And so let's go and look at Gen 4. And rather than saying they can't do it or they're not going to do it our way, let's say, what's your special sauce? And how do we get that special sauce engaged in the big picture, the core values of what this family is about, which is an important part of moving generationally down in the family business.
And so, let me ask you this. Clearly, you're not only passionate about this, with your son now in the business, you're going through this as well. So you're living it, you're breathing it. Let's make a big assumption. Here you go. And for our listeners, they can't see this. I'm passing over to you virtually my magic wand. And so you now have a family business, whether they're first generation or third generation or 15th generation, whatever it is, they're coming to you. You've worked your magic. You've gone through some of the politics of family dynamics. You've straightened all that out. So that's no longer on the scene. It's not so much an issue now. So now we're going back into your repertoire of strategies and tactics. How are you helping those businesses in terms of the other interchanges, whether it be the growth or increasing the profits, or at one point even a liquidity event when the family collectively decides, okay, you know what, time to close this chapter, set up a family office and move on to something else. How do you play in that?
Yeah, again, part of it is, we talked about this is never a straight line. It's always moving back in, with it. So we have strategies around growing and scaling the business and creating that self-managing company. We've got strategies to enhance communication and help resolve conflict for that generational so that they can build bigger futures. And then there's the opportunity set to be able to recognize that there is a whole area of family office, because when you reach a certain amount of wealth, again, that issue where you really need cohesive, collaborative, tax, legal, investment, insurance, protection, banking, philanthropy, bill paying, concierge services, because you really want to wrap this up for the family so that the family can take a la carte choices around, well, I would like to do this, but the other family does. So building and maintaining in the family office structure is a major focus, because when these families grow, they don't get to the third, the first, the second, third. They don't get generational unless there's some success. And with that success comes the complexity around wealth. What we call your wealth has created a second business. So what's the structure? And the structure we call it, and a lot of people call it, is the family office. Okay.
Absolutely.
So how do you build that? Do you have the right players in place? Again, back to very similar things to the way you build anything. You start with getting some clarity around what that future vision is. And just like you use your magic wand, we use ours. So we sit there with the family and says, look, when this thing is complete, what does it look like? Why is it important? What are the success criteria for it? We're really helping these families and business owners get the clarity. And once they've got that vision, we know there's a big education understanding gap that has to be filled. And unfortunately, sometimes the professionals that they go to speak a different language. So they don't really understand money and tax and legal and banking. And we help build those bridges and those educational components around the different pieces with the family office. And then ultimately, if it needs to be an exit, or in many cases, it's not an exit, but just a simple liquidity with a portion of it. We have an M&A advisory investment banking firm that we own that helps them navigate, and to what anyone who knows your work already knows, prepare them to go against professionals who do this for a living, and they're amateurs at it, and they've not really prepared themselves. So we help in that preparation, along those lines. So again, depending upon where they fit, the beauty of what we do is we really get the opportunity to have a blank sheet of paper. And we help them navigate those interchanges of family, business, individual ownership, as well as self-managing company, generational conversations, the family office for the second business, and then finding the appropriate liquidity events that may be necessary to move it forward.
And I mean, from what I'm hearing, and again, you can share with me, Jeffrey, yes, you're spot on, or hey, not so quite. Here's what it really is. But it sounds a lot like you're taking a holistic view of the people, the family, the business. So you're not in the one silo. You have the different silos in your business, but you're looking at it from the big picture. Okay, here's where they are right now. We can help them get from here to over there. Oh, and at one point, okay, there's going to be some kind of liquidity event. Got that. We can prepare for that. We'll help them. And so really you're there for the entire life cycle of the business as it expands, as it grows, as it goes through the ups, the downs, and the challenges. Would I be correct with that?
Yep, you got it. It's a comprehensive, collaborative approach to meet the family business or the closely held business owner wherever they are as they navigate the interchanges between themselves, their family, their business, and the ownership. And we have the skill set, and we have a deep bench of other professionals if the existing bench of advisors isn't sufficient. And sometimes it is. Oftentimes it's not because of how it was created. Sometimes it is. But yeah, that's exactly right. That's why we call ourselves the Swiss Army knife. We have all these pieces, but it's really about where are you in the life cycle between yourself, your family, your business, and your ownership around the areas of creating a self-managing company, having generational conversations, creating and building and maintaining a family office to handle the second business that all the wealth is created, and then ultimately the liquidity events that would be necessary. And it's not just exit. Sometimes liquidity is acquisition.
Sure. Acquisition, taking some risk off the table. But let me ask you this. Let's lean on our good old friend Pareto's law, or what some people call the 80-20 rule.
Yep.
And I love how you named your company, because you have these 4 interchanges: individual, family, business, ownership. And so collectively, when we look at the big picture, are there 20% of the same issues in any one area or across the areas that are creating 80% of the problems, and insult to injury? The business owners, the families don't even know it until you step in. Is anything coming to mind for that you can share for us?
There are some classic issues. So, around that. Probably the biggest classic issue, around the business itself is they really don't understand the money. They really don't get the finances, the accounting profession, as all professions, do a wonderful job of creating systems and language that requires them to be there to interpret and to build and design. So from the business side, one of the biggest issues is most people, when you ask them, a business owner, you ask them, so tell me about your company, they'll tell you how much their revenue increased. They'll tell you how much their profitability increased. They'll talk to you about their EBITDA. And then when you say, well, and you look at it and say, but how much cash did you make? Because many times you think there's a great saying, it's not mine, I love it. It's called, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is king.
Sure.
And I'll tell you, when it comes to business owners of all stripes and sizes, that's one of the key pieces that is missing. From a generational conversation, I brought it up already. There is this notion that the next generation just isn't good enough. Mm-hmm. And there's a notion that the next generation doesn't know what they're talking about. And then there's, on the other side, there's the notion that the previous generation doesn't get it, won't let control, and won't give us an opportunity. So we have that. That's one of the biggest problems with it. And then in general, families, conflict is something that people shy away from.
Sure.
And what we try to do is help people recognize that conflict is really the raw material for future opportunity and success. So we help them reframe and work with conflict and see it as a positive rather than a negative. And that's an important part of that generational conversation around it. The other issue with the generational conversation, unfortunately, there comes with that generational trauma. And so it's a tough place to be in that, but there are tools and techniques and professionals that we work with to be able to move that. But it's usually around communication and the notion and these preconceived notions that we have. The fact of the matter is, Brian, I've been where Brian has been because I was 33 years old and building a business, but I didn't have any of the support or any of the things that Brian has to work with. So for him to stand on my shoulders and take it further, that's what a father wants to do, but has to recognize that's very different than my experience. And he's never been where I am, where I'm 68 years old. And I've been doing it for 45 years. So that generational that's just one of this communication and how each of us are different, and we need to celebrate that. The family office I talked about, it's just your wealth has created a second business. The biggest problem that people have is they don't recognize that. They don't recognize, they focus it primarily on investments, and investments is only a small portion of it. Planning and tax and legal and philanthropy and wealth transition and wealth protection and all of tax minimization, all of that stuff needs a conversation that is happening with you and your family in the middle and your quote unquote board of trustees or advisors around that. And the only structure that works around that is the family office. It's been designed around that. It's been proven to do that. The problem is most people don't feel that they need that. They're not demanding it. Again, partly because they don't think it's there. So there's a real amount of inefficiencies and ineffectiveness that takes place because tax people are generally doing just the 1040s. They're not necessarily talking about planning. Legal people are just working on the transaction part of it. Bankers are only looking for deposits and stuff. Investment people are only looking for assets to manage. Insurance people are only looking to sell insurance. Yet all of that is important to be able to navigate through that second business of wealth. So that's a problem. And then you already know what the biggest problem on the liquidity side is. Nobody prepares for it.
Yeah.
Nobody plans for it. There's no planning. There's no preparation. So there's your 80-20. If people would just focus on those pieces, cash is king, communication and conflict resolution, recognizing wealth has created a second business. It's not a do-it-yourself game at all. It's virtually impossible to do it yourself with the complexity of all the stuff. And then recognizing that liquidity requires time and planning. Those are the 20%.
Words to the wise. And I'm thinking now as a listener, Ahmie, you've taken a very complex situation. I mean, openly, each one of those areas could easily not just be an episode, it could be a series. and you've distilled it down to some actionable takeaway items that we can all start to do. But let me ask you this. I'm thinking now as a listener, and the listener saying, okay, Ahmie, you make a terrific case, really like what you're doing, where you've been, where you're going. There's so much to do though. And so for that listener who's feeling overwhelmed, even though you've distilled it down, if they could do one thing starting today, because for every episode here on the Deep Wealth Podcast, we like to have one actionable item. So before the podcast ends and they go to the next email, phone call, meeting, whatever it's going to be, that they can start one thing. This can be a place of action. So they finish with the podcast, they finish listening to us, Ahmie. What would be one action that they could start doing today that would make an immeasurable difference for the days, years ahead?
They would get clarity. And the way they would get clarity is they would answer these questions. If we're sitting here and you pick the number, 3 years, 5 years, 25 years, 100 years, okay? We're sitting here during that time period. What has to happen so that I am going to feel really good, ecstatic about my success, my ability to do anything both personally and professionally? So they would start with that question. They'd start to create the vision. Then they would, once that vision, because that's the fun part, because you can just say whatever you want to say. Then reality comes in and it says, oh my God, how am I going to do it? So then they have to go to the next level of questioning that says, okay, let me identify all the reasons why this is not going to happen. And take all and get those clear around the obstacles, determine what their secret sauce is, what are they special, what are their strengths, and then identify from those 3 questions. From there, they can begin to build out their team of who's to be able to move this thing forward. And obviously, Interchange Capital Partners is a significant who for them.
Absolutely. And love that. So clarity, get some clarity. And you know what? You're taking a page right of our playbook. It's one and the same. It may say a little bit differently, but it gets to the same place. Clarity is so important. Well, Ahmie, let me ask you this, because we could easily keep on going down this path of all these different areas. You've given us some terrific advice, some wisdom, some insights. You've been there, you've done that, as the saying goes, and now you're taking your experience and your insights, you're helping others. So we're at the point where we need to start wrapping up. And I have the privilege and the honor to ask the question to you that I have of every single guest on the podcast. And it's a fun question. So let me set that up and we'll go into wrap up mode. So I'd like you to imagine now the movie Back to the Future. And in the movie, you have that magical DeLorean car that can take you to any point in time. So, Ahmie, here's the fun part. It's tomorrow morning. You look outside your window, and not only is the DeLorean car there, but the door is open, the car is curbside, it's waiting for you to hop on in. So you hop in and you can now go to any point in time in your life. Ahmie, as a young child, a teenager, whatever point in time it would be. What would you tell your younger self in terms of life lessons or life wisdom? Or, hey, Ahmie, do this, but don't do that. What would that sound like?
You really don't need to worry about this stuff, is what I would tell my younger self. There's that great thing of all the things that I worry about and the amount of that actually come to reality that really need. I look back on my life and worry. I worried about a lot of things that never, ever happened. So look, I would go back and I would tell my younger self, trust your special sauce, identify your special sauce, trust that you are constantly creating value with whomever you run into, and that's who you're about. Trust that, and everything else will be fine.
Some terrific advice. And you know what, Ahmie, just such a powerful insight. As you're sharing that, my mind was drawn towards funny man Mark Twain, who's funny, but also so insightful. And he says something very similar. He said, I've had a lot of worries in my life, most of which never happened. And to your point, it's terrific to share that. So, Ahmie, we will put everything in the show notes. So for our listeners, it'll be a point and click. For a listener, though, that likes what they're hearing, they want to have more information, have a conversation with you, become a client, whatever it may be, where's the best place online for someone to find you and reach out to ask a question?
I mean, they can obviously go to our website, Interchange Capital Partners, interchangecp.com. We offer a second opinion service around all those areas. And it's really about the opportunity to have that conversation, that initial conversation, to identify where you are in that life cycle and where you're stuck. We like to find the places where you're stuck and help build the bridges and the maps and all the ways to be able to navigate those interchanges. So obviously, interchangecp.com. You can email us at team@interchangecp.com. Obviously, they'll find ways to reach us. They can Google me, Ahmie Baum. Today, the good news is if you would like to find somebody, it's easier than ever. If you like what you heard, it's easy to find us.
And for our listeners, again, it really can't get any easier. It's all in the show notes. It's a point and click, and off you go with that. Well, Ahmie, it's official. This is a wrap and a heartfelt thank you. You shared your insights from the trenches, your wisdom from the trenches, and as we say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. And as I said from the beginning, I hope your listeners found some value.
The Deep Wealth experience was definitely a game changer for me.
This course is one of the best investments you will ever make, because you will get an ROI of 100 times that. Anybody who doesn't go through it will lose millions.
If you don't have time for this program, you'll never have time for a successful liquidity.
I mean, it was the best value of any business course I've ever taken. The money was very well spent.
Compared to when we first began, today I feel better prepared, but in some respects, maybe less prepared, not because of the course, but because the course brought to light so many things that I thought we were on top of that we need to fix.
I 100% believe there's never a great time for a business owner to allocate extra hours into his or her week or day. So it's an investment that will yield results today. I thought I will reap the benefit of this program in 3 to 5 years down the road. But as soon as I stepped forward into the program, my mind changed immediately.
There was so much value in the experience that the time I invested paid back so much for the energy that was expended.
The Deep Wealth experience compared to other programs is the top. What we learned is very practical. Sometimes you learn stuff that is great to learn, but you never use it. The stuff we learned from Deep Wealth experience, I believe it's going to benefit us both.
I've done an executive MBA. I've worked for billion-dollar companies before. I've worked for smaller companies before I started my business. I've been running my business successfully now for getting close to a decade. We're on a growth trajectory. Reflecting back on the Deep Wealth, I knew less than 10% what I know now. Maybe close to 1% even.
Hands down the best program in which I've ever participated. And we've done a lot of different things over the years. We've been in other mastermind groups, gone to many seminars, workshops, conferences, retreats, read books. This was so different. I haven't had an experience that's anything close to this in all the years that we've been at this. It's 5-star, A+.
I would highly recommend it to any super busy business owner out there. And Deep Wealth is an accurate name for it. This program leads to deeper wealth and happier wealth, not just deeper wealth. I don't think there's a dollar value that could be associated with such an experience and knowledge that could be applied today and forever.
Are you leaving millions on the table? Please visit www.deepwealth.com/success to learn more. If you're not on my email list, you'll want to be. Sign up at www.deepwealth.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, if it added value, if you walked away with some new insights and strategies, please leave a review on your favorite podcast channel. Reviews help us reach new listeners, grow the show, and continue to create content that you'll enjoy. And as we wrap up this episode, as always, please stay healthy and safe.